I'm back again with the fifth installment of OPL's Art at Home. This is a mini YouTube series where we explore some of the more notable works from the Orillia Public Library's permanent art collection. This week's theme is the big boys. It is a coincidence that we're looking at all male artists today, but what we are going to look into are artists who've had very successful, very long careers, and I'd like to share with you a little bit about their histories. So there are 5 artists to look at today. Let's get started. James Wilson Morris was one of the earliest Canadian modernist painters and the first Canadian to achieve widespread acceptance abroad. Born of a wealthy and strictly Presbyterian merchant family, he showed an early interest in painting. His father, however, wanted him to enter law, and after studying at the University of Toronto and Osgoode Hall, he was called to the Ontario Bar in 1889, but he never practiced. Montreal art dealer William Stewart advised James to study art abroad, and Sir William Van Horn, an artist and collector who recognized James's talent, persuaded his father to finance his studies in Europe. He began his studies at the Académie Julian in Paris in 1890, but soon he sought individual masters. First, the Barbizon painter Henri Apinier, then the American painter James McNeill Whistler, whose iconic Whistler's Mother painting you may recognize. But it was in Venice when Morris visited his friend and fellow Canadian painter Maurice Cullen, where the particular light effects changed his perception and set him on his course as a painter. Paris remained for many years the center of Morris's world. He became one of the left bank expatriates. The left bank refers to the south side of the Seine River, a smaller section of Paris historically known as the artistic part of the city. This is where many famous writers and artists lived and worked, including Picasso, Matisse, and Hemingway. Maurice never returned to live in Canada, but each year until his parents passed away, he visited and painted the extraordinary winter sketches and pictures of Quebec City. While the piece in our collection is a reproduction, I can tell you that the original is an oil painting on canvas, and it lives at the National Gallery of Canada collections. This bronze bust, created by Sidney March, was gifted to the library in 1925 by the Curran family. The subject of this artwork, Mr. Robert Curran, who grew up in Orillia, won 3 straight amateur North American rowing titles in the late 1800s, at a time when the sport was the most high profile in the world. He was one of the athletes who helped earn Orillia the moniker City of Champions. Curran was also a 7 times mayor of Orillia and editor of a weekly newspaper called The Newsletter, founded by his father, John Curran. Sidney March was a prolific artist whose primary focus was portrait busts and other sculptures of British royalty and contemporary figures, as well as war memorials. He was one of 8 artists in the family. His brother Vernon March was renowned for major monuments such as the now controversial Samuel de Champlain Monument in Orillia. In 1925, Vernon participated in an open worldwide competition to design and build the National War Memorial of Canada. He was one of 7 finalists out of a total of 127 entrants. The 7 finalists then submitted scale models of their designs. Vernon was awarded the commission in January of 1926. Work on the monument had not yet been completed when Vernon died of pneumonia in 1930. His 6 siblings completed the bronze statues for the monument. They molded the figures in clay and cast them in plaster. The family completed the work by July 1932, and it was finally shipped to Canada in 1937. Barnett was born in Massachusetts in 1911. By the age of 10, he knew that he wanted to be an artist. As a student, he studied with Philip Leslie Hale at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, and viewed firsthand John Singer Sargent at work on the murals of the Boston Public Library. In 1930, Barnett studied at the Art Students League of New York, beginning his long association with the school as a student and then as a teacher. Here, he concentrated on painting as well as printmaking, and in 1936, he became the official printer for the Art Student League. Barnett's artistic output spans 80 years. He lived to be 101. Few artists other than Picasso or Monet can claim such a long, continuous period of inspired art making, nor the logical progression of moving through artistic phases. In the 1930s, he was a social realist. In the 1940s, a modernist. In the 1950s, an abstract expressionist. And in the 1960s and onward, he settled on a representational minimalism honed from the refinement of his earlier explorations. Blue Robe is an example of that style. And this brings us to our fifth and final artist, Joseph Karsh, the only artist in our collection whose medium is photography. Joseph Karsh immigrated to Canada in 1924 as an Armenian refugee. He lived and studied with his uncle George Nakashian, a portrait photographer in Sherbrooke, Quebec, before apprenticing in Boston with the celebrity portrait photographer John H. Garrow. In 1932, Karsh moved to Ottawa, where he opened a portrait studio with the intent of photographing what he called people of consequence. Joseph Karsh's photographic portraits have come to represent the public images of major international figures of politics, science, and culture in the 20th century. The portraits have been displayed in public galleries and circulated widely in magazines. Karsh's 1941 portrait of Winston Churchill, for example, which appeared on the cover of Life magazine, stands as the definitive portrayal of Churchill's character. In 1972, Karsh and his wife moved to the Chateau Laurier Hotel in Ottawa, where he maintained an apartment and a working studio. He was known professionally as Karsh of Ottawa. Karsh is widely recognized as Canada's leading portrait photographer. In general, he's recognized as one of the best-known and great portrait photographers of the 20th century. The Karsh Award, dedicated to Joseph and his brother Malak, is awarded by the City of Ottawa every 2 years to an established professional artist for outstanding artistic work in a photo-based medium. Well, that's it for episode 5 of OPL's Art at Home. Please join us next week for our 6th and final installment of this series. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our posts, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, etc. And we will see you next week.